Ani Sego, Wache. Good afternoon. Kay get sanachun and dagwayag mangwayang mangpi nongwa nichke wen gawin wayawat. I first of all want to acknowledge the Creator and creation, the prayers and the protocols within this territory, and those prayers that were spoken this morning. We know that many speak when the sun rises, they speak to the Creator and they give thanks for another day. And I know that's occurred in this territory. I also, want to acknowledge I've been given tobacco here, and I was just indicating to the organizers that I did bring my pipe, which is very important to me in the work that I do, and but I won't smoke that here because there's cameras here, and it's not appropriate in front of cameras. But I do want to let you know that what is important when we do these protocols and when we conduct our ceremonies is that we do that in a respectful way, and as such I will take the tobacco that's been given to me, and I will raise that pipe with a young man before I leave here today. I want to share that protocol in raising the pipe in honor of you all here today, and celebrate the spark of life that gives sanctity to the gift of knowledge. Your education is sacred. I want to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Fort William First Nation, and I want to thank and ask that appreciation be conveyed to Chief Collins and his council and the community via Mr. Bannon, the acting CEO. I also want to acknowledge that these are the Anishinaabe territory through the treaties, and that these are also shared lands. As in the treaties, the importance of sharing should never be understated. In this case, please consider intently. These lands are what many people call home, and an important social gathering place to those that come from the north, the south, the east, and the west. We acknowledge our Indigenous brothers and sisters from other territories, and we acknowledge our treaty partners. So in that, I just wanted to open my remarks by saying that we often recognize that these places we call treaties and these territories, we often fall into the very unfortunate situation of claiming ownership, which is not the case. Our ancestors and our elders tell us that we belong to the land. The treaties were solemn agreements about sharing space, time, and experiences. The treaties were about ensuring that everyone could benefit from these gifts freely given by the Creator. And I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come back to the very issue of space, time, and experience with one another. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the organizing committee and congratulate them on a very, very important event, which I have been told this is a very important orientation for the students. I want to very specifically acknowledge Confederation College as the lead organizer, but also two other partnering institutions. Can we give them a big round of applause? They did an excellent job. Also, too, I want to acknowledge Anishinaabe Aski Nation, other First Nations, regional student support organizations, the Aboriginal support services within the college, funders, federal government, provincial, local, and the private sector, the chief of police. There really are so many partners here to acknowledge, and I apologize if I missed anybody, but I just wanted to acknowledge each and every one of you. Volunteers, families, First Nation leaders that are at home right now and who have gifted and who have lent their community members and their children to these education institutions so that they can become part of the solution. And the key partner of all you, the students. On behalf of the Chiefs of Ontario, I want to commend, acknowledge, and encourage all of you. This is a very critical commitment that you are making, one that is about happiness, hope, and humanity. And I'd like to stress that for a second. You know, we know that many people that want education don't have it. And it's often when we see our young people, when they make achievements through the various regimes of education, even if it's at daycare, because my little girl just moved from daycare to JK, you know, that the happiness that you see is runs so deep in that individual. And it's really encouraging that we see that here today in the students. And that gives us the hope that we need, so that these little ones, like young Cody, that's right there, you know, that's a future right there. And we want to acknowledge that what you are going to be doing is really going to lay the foundation for little ones like that. And ultimately, humanity. The gift of knowledge through the endeavor of education is really about all of these combined. But I'd like to expand on the human element. The reality is this: education is about humanity. Everything that you do in this, within the core of your mind, is really intended to ultimately help others. Another human being is going to benefit from your education. Family, community, co-workers, this country, and perhaps beyond. Everyone will be impacted by your education, including you. Information. There will be much information. Sometimes you'll be overloaded. It'll almost paralyze you. I know, I've been there before. But it is this information that forms the substance of your education, your degrees, your professional credentials. It's going to be vital in obtaining your career of choice. The information that will be developed into course lectures, presentations, quizzes, essays, class discussions, exams, that information will turn to your dreams, it'll turn them into realities, and you will also help others' dreams come true. I just want to make a note here about my education, and I do this with I'm very careful to tell you that I did spend 8 years in post-secondary. I hope you don't have to do that. I'm a tough learner. I learn the hard way sometimes. I spent 8 years in post-secondary. I was an adult learner, and I can assure you, I have an idea of what many of you are going through right now. Education is a serious choice and an important commitment. Some things have changed since I started. I started my education in James Bay. So I did live in the north, and when I went to school in Moosonee, I did a lot of my education through Contact North. And at that time, we only had DOS, and internet was just coming in. So you can imagine how slow things were. I was a slow learner. Other things have remained the same. And one of those things is the level of commitment that's required to get from point A to point B from the start of the year to the end of the year. But you know what? I'm going to just say this, that as Cynthia had indicated, we're in a great time, and big change is going to happen. And that big change is going to happen if you try. Since I attended post-secondary, a great many things have happened for me because of education. I have addressed protocols with the monarch, Prince Charles as a representative. I've advised various policymakers. I've spoken to prime ministers on what our issues are. I've met President Bill Clinton twice, and I've addressed him in the Ontario Economic Summit, and have helped create Ontario's energy policies from that discussion. I've sat with many great leaders to move important political processes forward, including the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And I want to give you the story behind that and tell you what I mean. It was when this current Liberal government was first elected in that they were up for an early re-election, and there was a political campaign at the provincial level. And I was with my Grand Chief at the time, Grand Chief Patrick Madabi, and he said, let's go talk to some of those provincial party leaders. So we went to go see Andrea Horvath, and at that meeting, it was at that time that the Prime Minister had not yet endorsed the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And I said, Pat, you know, I'm gonna ask this provincial party leader if she would actually bring a motion forward to move the UNDRIP. And I did that, and I asked her, I said, if you were the Premier, would you bring the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People forward in the provincial legislature to get support? Absolutely, Chief. And I knew she wasn't going to win. But what I did know was I knew the system, and I knew that they would make the commitment, but all they'd have to do is go tell the Liberals, and they'd say, oh no, Chief, we're going to do that. And that's exactly what happened. But you see, I knew the system because it was what I was taught, and if I didn't know that system, a couple months later, there wouldn't have been an announcement that the Premier at the time, McGuinty, brought that letter forward to the Prime Minister, and then he later would endorse it. And basically, all I'm telling you is that if I didn't know the system, if I wasn't taught that formally, I wouldn't know how to work that system. And again, I just need to tell you that because it's those things that we feel we can never ever make a difference, and that we're insignificant. Yes, on one hand we're insignificant and we must recognize our humility, but on another sense we must recognize our strengths, and we do that through education. I just want to tell you that it took me a few years to figure out that education was important. I went back to school when I was about 26, so education for me included a family, work, and for me, personal healing. I decided that if I was going to make something of my life, I would need to turn away from alcohol and drugs, and that choice was made 23 years ago. I've not turned back ever since, and it's because of that I was able to obtain my education. And you know, I just say, you know, but for the grace of the Creator and the gift of life that I've been given that. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to be part of this important step forward and what I think is a remarkable evolution, your education. Your efforts are going to change the world. Among you, there are doctors, lawyers, chiefs, chief executive officers, chiefs of staff. There are engineers, social workers, fashion designers, directors, teachers, marketing specialists, musicians, home builders, road builders, and bridge builders. The list goes on. You are building a future. I was elected by the chiefs about 3 months ago on a platform that I'd like to share with you really quickly. It was securing a future for our children. The pillars within that are important to me because they're important to you. The pillars are: 1, sovereignty and inherent rights; 2, treaties and First Nation jurisdiction; 3, quality of life in our First Nations; 4, sustainability and the next generation. And why I tell you that is because I can't do that alone. The chiefs can't do that alone. We need our First Nations to be successful and strong. Your education is key to that success and key to that strength. I'm confident that I may have the honor to work with a number of you on shared visions and strategies. That will only happen through your education. Your efforts are going to help change the lives of many people, those that are poor, those that are sick, those that want to improve their life situations. You'll help change the lives of young and old. You'll help corporations. You will help communities. You will help families. You will help change the life of someone who may be incarcerated, or you may help change the life of a youth so that they can avoid incarceration. You will help society by helping change the incarceration rates of Aboriginal people in this country just by being part of the process of higher learning. Your education will help ensure that we deal with the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in this country. Many of you will travel to other far-off places and in this world, and you will help other nations of people. In conclusion, let me share something with you. I was thinking this morning, as I mentioned, the gifts given by the Creator. The most important gift that the Creator gave is the spark of life, which represents so many things. And in this case, the spark of life represents your education. Education is about assessing, evaluating, transmitting, storing, conveying, recycling, applying, and speaking about information. There is an important, miraculous set of activities that happen in the human body when we engage in education. The brain does some very important and critical things. The fancy word for that, and I hope I get this correct, is neurotransmission. Let me explain what I was taught in one of my college courses. First of all, we take information through one of our five senses, sometimes our sixth sense. Next, the brain will work with the nervous system and the endocrine system. And what I've been taught about that through education is that the nervous system is our nerve, what happens through our spine. But our endocrine system is also the blood system and your hemoglobin and those things, the nutrients, and that go through all your different vital organs. But what's really important here to remember is that there's a messaging and a transmittal that goes through the brain cells in these things called dendrites. They're little finger-like things, and what happens is there's something that I'll call the gap between the nerves, the various parts of the cell, the brain, the cell in your brains. The gap is where the information is transmitted, and what's transmitted is a little spark. The spark of life is the most vital component in the process of learning. So again, I just want to tell you what that means. And why I brought my pipe here today was because there's a very important part, and I'm glad that Deputy Grand Chief Wabus, he talked about the importance of our traditional learning. And as part of being Anishinaabe, I have that pwagan that I've carried ever since I put that other life away. And when the pipe is brought together, it's a stem and a bowl. And in that bowl, that tobacco that we were given, which represents all the gifts that the Creator gave, that tobacco goes inside of that bowl that represents the woman. She carries everything. She carries life. But there's one important aspect and element, is that there's a spark. And when we light that pipe, it represents life itself. And without that spark, without that little bit of light, we would not have life itself. That's why our people acknowledge the sacred fire as we do as First Nation people. That was something I thought about very early this morning as I considered what I might talk about. Your education starts with the spark of life. One important message for me, your education is sacred. And I want to tell you that I'm very appreciative that I've come here to look for success. I've often said in my own community, where I was chief for 10 years, and every opportunity that I had, which was every year we had our graduation ceremonies, I told our students, I told the young higher learners and those that went back, the adult learners, I said, you know, your success, and when you achieve something, we succeed. We become stronger as a people, we become stronger as communities, we become stronger as nations. Remember, your education starts with that small spark, and is carried through your efforts and the efforts of those that are here to help you. Make the grade, pass the test, obtain your degrees, diplomas, and certificates. Again, thank you for allowing me to be part of this step in your journey. In conclusion, if you strive to do your best and honor the sacred gifts of life to learn, miracles will happen in your life and you will change the world. Miigwech.